There is an old saying in the islands: what's done in the dark will always come to light. For 20 years there was an island, just off the coast of St. Thomas, close enough to see from a boat, close enough to wonder about. The local residents saw the helicopters, saw the boats, heard the stories, and were told, nothing to see, nothing to worry about. This man is a businessman, a philanthropist. He gives to our schools. He gives to our little leagues. He is good for the Virgin Islands. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the thing everyone pretends not to see. This is the story of how Jeffrey Epstein didn't just buy an island in the Virgin Islands. He also bought the people in leadership. And how the whispers that moved through these communities for 20 years turned out to be true and worse than anyone imagined. 1998. A man named Jeffrey Epstein, a financier from New York, already quietly notorious in certain circles, purchases a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands for $8 million. Little St. James, just off the coast of St. Thomas. You couldn't get there without a boat or a helicopter. That was the point. He arrives bearing gifts. Scholarships for the university. Donations for the schools. Money for the little leagues. Smiles for the politicians. The image of a wealthy man who loves the Virgin Islands and wants to give back. In the Caribbean we have a name for someone like that. We call it a setup. We assume there must be a catch. But in 1998 nobody was saying that out loud. Not yet. What they were doing, quietly, officially, with signatures and stamps and legal documents, was giving him something in return. Something that would eventually be worth $300 million. Tax exemptions. Through a company called Financial Trust. Approved by the Industrial Development Commission. Starting in 1999. While this man had already been quietly under investigation for crimes against children in Florida. The island was his. And now, so was the government. Here is where the story gets personal to the Virgin Islands in a way that no mainland reporter can fully explain. Because what happened next wasn't just political corruption. It was closer than that. It lived inside Government House. Governor John de Jong took office in 2007. And his wife, the First Lady of the Virgin Islands, Cecile de Jong, was already on Jeffrey Epstein's payroll. For 20 years she worked as office manager for his shell companies. She lobbied government officials on his behalf. She cultivated politicians. She wrote letters. She made calls. And when the Virgin Islands Senate in 2011 was considering new rules about how registered sex offenders would have to report their travel, Cecile de Jong was in Epstein's ear. Writing him suggested language. Editing legislation according to his feedback. Working to make sure the law that was supposed to watch him had the right loopholes. When his preferred language didn't make it into the final bill, she told him what to do next. Work around it. Find the friendly senators. Approach the right people. The First Lady of the Virgin Islands was managing a convicted sex offender's political strategy. And the governor, her husband, was required by law to sign off on Epstein's tax exemptions. He did. In the islands we say, you can't separate the fish from the water. 2011. Epstein has now been convicted. He has served his time, a notoriously light 13 months, work release included. He has registered as a sex offender in the Virgin Islands. There are rules that come with that registration. One of them requires that registered sex offenders report their travel at least 21 days before leaving the territory. Attorney General Vincent Fraser granted Epstein a waiver from that requirement. A convicted predator, a registered sex offender, granted special permission to travel freely without oversight. Fraser was later named in a federal lawsuit filed by 6 of Epstein's victims. All claims against him were dismissed. He has not publicly explained why he granted the waiver. The documents exist. The waiver exists. The girls who were trafficked to that island during those years of free travel also exist. Some things you cannot explain away with a dismissal. Let us talk about who knew what and when. Stacey Plaskett served as General Counsel for the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority from 2007 to 2012. The ADA is the body that approved Epstein's tax exemptions even after his conviction. After leaving the ADA, she went to work at the law firm of Erica Kellerholz, Epstein's own Virgin Islands attorney. In 2012 she ran for Congress. Epstein donated Cecile de Jong emailed Epstein asking him to help get Plaskett elected, writing, "We would have a friend in Stacey." In 2018, 1 year before Epstein's federal arrest, Plaskett personally reached out to invite Epstein to her fundraiser. Writing, "I would be grateful for his support. His crimes had been public for a decade." In February 2019, while a congressional hearing was underway, text messages in the Epstein files show someone texting with Epstein in real time. The timing aligned with Plaskett's own line of questioning. She has acknowledged receiving texts from Epstein during the hearing. Plaskett was named in the 2023 lawsuit filed by 6 Epstein victims. The lawsuit was later dismissed with prejudice. She has stated she learned of Epstein's crimes at the same time as the rest of the country. The documents tell a different story about the timeline. You can read them yourself. 2013. Albert Bryan is serving as chairman of the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority Board. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender, registered in the Virgin Islands, applies for another decade of tax exemptions. Bryan signs off. Epstein's companies receive approval through 2023. 2018. Bryan is running for governor. Documents show Bryan suggesting which schools Epstein should donate $50,000 to. Another document shows Bryan asking that $30,000 go to the Vi Little League. A $25,000 private gift to Bryan's inaugural committee also appears in the records. January 2019. Bryan is sworn in as governor. Within weeks he is texting Epstein about a construction enforcement dispute on the islands. He tells Epstein he has spoken to the top environmental official and asked him to pause enforcement. He asks the commissioner to recuse himself and approve all of Epstein's previous permit requests. His text to Epstein reads, "We got you." April 2019. New Attorney General Denise George takes office. Within 2 weeks, Bryan calls her and tells her Epstein wants a waiver from his sex offender travel requirements. George refuses. She tells Bryan her job is to protect the community. The texts exist. You can read them yourself. Here is the part of the story the Virgin Islands should know. While all of this was happening, there were people in this territory who were watching, who were troubled, who believed these women. And one of them did something about it. Denise George, former television news reporter, Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, the 16th person to hold that office. She filed suit against Epstein's estate. She fought for 3 years. She secured private settlements for all 150 victims. And on November 29, 2022, she won $105 million from the estate, the largest government lawsuit settlement in Virgin Islands history. Then she went after J.P. Morgan Chase, the bank that processed Epstein's payments. The bank that, she alleged, knew exactly what that money was for and processed it anyway. 4 days after she filed that lawsuit, on New Year's Eve, she was cooking callaloo at her father's house in St. Thomas when a security officer arrived at the door with a letter of termination. Governor Bryan later said, "If we never mention Jeffrey Epstein again, that would be good for me." After George was fired, her replacement quietly settled with billionaire Leon Black, granting him a total release from all territory claims. She was then appointed to a lifetime judgeship by Governor Bryan. The next Attorney General resigned at Bryan's specific request. And the Attorney General who serves today previously defended the executor of Epstein's estate against Denise George's own lawsuit. The woman who fought for the victims was removed. The men who protected the predator remained. Here is the part that lives in the bushes. People comment on every Epstein article, "We always knew." But that is not entirely true, and it is not entirely false either. What people knew was the feeling. The helicopters too frequent for a simple vacation home. The boats at odd hours. The girls who were seen and then not seen. The money that flowed too freely. The politicians who smiled too warmly at a man who gave too generously. That is not knowing. That is sensing. And there is a difference. What we did not know, what we were never told, is that the First Lady was on his payroll. That the Attorney General had given him a travel waiver. That 3 consecutive governors had close ties to him. We did not know because we were not supposed to know. The island was right there. The silence was constructed. Is March 2026. The $105 million that was supposed to fund victim advocacy and crime prevention in this territory is being redirected to unrelated government debts. The islands were purchased in 2023 for $60 million by a billionaire who promised a luxury resort. As of today, no construction has been reported. A petition signed by VI residents calls for an independent investigation into communications between Governor Brian Epstein. The investigation has not happened. And the man who now serves as Attorney General of the Virgin Islands previously defended the executor of Jeffrey Epstein's estate. The story is not over. Certain kinds of evil. It does not announce itself. It comes with money and smiles and scholarships and little league donations and promises of investment. It makes itself useful. It makes itself necessary. It makes itself protected. And then one day someone is cooking callaloo at her father's house on New Year's Eve and a letter arrives at the door. And you understand that the silence was never accidental. The girls who came to that island, some as young as 12, deserved protection from this territory. They did not receive it. Denise George believed them. And look what happened to her. We do not tell this story to frighten you. We tell it because good stories deserve to be told. And the stories that have been whispered through the bushes for 20 years deserve to finally be spoken out loud. In the Virgin Islands, we know about the goat-foot woman. She walks where others won't. She sees what others pretend not to see. She moves through the dark and she carries a light. This light doesn't go out. If you have a story the community deserves to know, reach out. Let that story be told.